Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Should be a great show. We've got a very special guest who's going to join us for the first hour. It's going to be a lot of fun. But hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. It's going to be a great show tonight. Let's go.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything will be all right. Everything will put that in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
All right. Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. So before we get to our guest, just a quick reminder that we are having a very, very important conference coming up. March 25th and 26th in Washington, D.C., the Center for Political Innovation will be holding the Summit Against Hypocrisy. This is our answer, our prebuttal to Joe Biden's Summit for Democracy that he's scheduled. He's got his third one. It's this conference he's putting on to attack China and Russia and Venezuela and Iran and Nicaragua and all the great countries that are standing up to Wall Street imperialism. He's going to attack them in his Summit for Democracy. So we are having a Summit Against Hypocrisy the weekend before. And if you want to attend, all you have to do is sign up down below. Go ahead and register to attend the Summit Against Hypocrisy. Here is the link. Ryan, who is going to be one of the speakers at the conference, just dropped the link in the chat. And you can also send us a donation. A link down below. If you want to send us a donation to help out with the conference. Scott Ritter will be speaking. Garland Nixon will be speaking. We will be having speeches from Jyoti Brar, the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. She will be speaking as well. She's flying in from the United Kingdom. Peter Coffin, the great comedian who's got a great YouTube channel, has made great documentaries. He will also be speaking. There's going to be music. There's going to be speeches. Everyone who goes will get a copy of my new book, which is called Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. So you really don't want to miss it. It's going to be a great 2-day conference in Washington, D.C. So go ahead and register today. I look forward to meeting all of you there. It is going to be an awesome, awesome event. And if you can't make it, you can always shoot us a donation to help us do the event. But I really hope to see you all there. And I am now bringing on a special guest who I believe will be at the summit. You also get to meet him at the summit. And this is Liam, my good friend Liam, who goes by Space Larouche on Twitter. Hi, Liam. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. How about you, Caleb?
I'm good. So, Liam, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience here? I know you've been kind of watched these streams for a while. I've met you. You've spoken at Schiller Institute conferences before. And we're going to kind of shoot the breeze about all kinds of different things here tonight. But why don't you introduce yourself, tell the audience about who you are, your background, kind of give them an introduction.
Great. Yeah. Well, I've been into politics since I was a young man, and I stumbled upon Caleb Maupin's videos back in 2019, I believe, and I've been a big fan of yours ever since. And one day you interviewed someone named Daniel Burke, who is a good friend of mine, a personal friend of mine now. Because of you, I met him because of the interview with you, and I've been out with the Larouche organization, working with them, doing things with them. I just spoke at a conference last Saturday, and I spoke at a conference on October 15th, which went very well. We had lots of great folks there, folks from all over the world doing presentations on the solutions to a lot of today's crises. So that gives you a little bit of a... Oh, thank you. Nice to meet you. Someone in the chat said hi.
Oh yeah, people in the chat love you already. I guess we were going to talk a little bit about some of the recent events that have gone on. I know that you probably have some thoughts on like the bank failures and things like that. I mean, when I look at the bank failures, I mean, people are blaming this on deregulation. People are blaming this on the inability of financial institutions to regulate themselves. However, I think the issue at hand, when it really gets down to it, is more or less the problem of overproduction and the problem that we're living in the aftermath of a huge technological leap, And this huge technological leap is displacing a lot of workers. Workers can't afford to buy back the products that they produce. The room for workers at the assembly line is not what it once was. In addition to that, only human labor creates value. So when you eliminate human labor from the assembly line, the profits that the capitalists can extract also go down. And that we have a big financial problem. It's coming as a result of the profit system and the huge leaps in technology. And this is a classic crisis of overproduction, a classic crisis of the tendency of the falling rate of profit. And ultimately, it points to the need for a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government that will control the banks, factories, and industries and organize the economy to serve public good and not the profits of a few. That's how I look at all of this. And that the banking system ultimately should be organized by the state. And it should be organized to serve the interests of the public. We need a banking system where credit is strategically assigned for the good of the country to fulfill an overall economic vision. I think your organization talks about a national bank. You talk about Alexander Hamilton and all of that. That's how I look at all of this. What do you think?
Well, as far as these bank crises is, Lyndon Larouche was talking about, I think, the moment that we're in right now for ever since 1971, he's been pointing out that, look, the economic system that we have today, it's not based on a sound system. It's not based on sound money. It's based on something that inevitably will collapse. And I think that we're seeing the collapse rapidly today. I mean, when you look at what's happening in East Palestine, when you look at what's happening all over the world, not just with Russia, not just with Taiwan, but all over the world, as far as in the resistance to this growing financial bubble and this octopus coming out of the West that has its hands on everything. This is going to collapse, and that's why things are getting worse and worse, and it's becoming more and more clear to more people, and that's why this kind of coalition that seems to be emerging of people speaking against the Russian-Ukraine war is coming out of all of these different kinds of apparatuses, such as the Center for Political Innovation, the Larouche Organization, the Schiller Institute, the Libertarian Party, the People's Party. It's a reaction against the decline of the empire that we are seeing. And what I particularly like about you, Caleb, and what I especially love about the Larouche Organization is when we start talking about solutions. What does the new paradigm actually look like? How do we deliver through a government of action? How do we actually deliver a new mode of production that puts people, puts humanity first, that develops the human mind, that develops the culture to be more beautiful, so that we could have a more beautiful society by, for, and through the people? And that's what I'm attracted to.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that's out there, especially stuff that's calling itself socialist or communist, it doesn't really offer solutions other than burn it down, tear it down, and, I mean, I see people who criticize me, and it's like, one of the criticisms is like, oh, you want to leave the United States intact. You don't want to tear down this racist, settler, colonialist country. And it's like, well, I want a better life for the people here. And I don't think life is going to get better for people if we just burn the country to the ground. And I don't think it's going to get better for people if we just, I mean, the capitalists are already doing that. Look at East Palestine, look at Look at the water that's not being purified. Look at the power plants that are falling apart. I mean, it's like the country's already falling apart. If we just wanted to tear this country apart further, that would put us in alliance with the elite. Our goal is to offer solutions to make people's lives better. And if we're going to be taken seriously politically, we have to present ways that we would make our lives better. I mean, and people generally vote for candidates who will try to make their lives better. And I don't hear any of that. So much of what passes for socialism or leftism is just this like people feel like they're very smart because they've discovered that America is racist or something. I feel like that makes them very smart. So they then point their finger at America and say, America is racist. America is racist. I want to destroy this country. And it's like, well, good for you. Get your anger out. But that's not real politics. Real politics is like what Stalin did when he rapidly industrialized the USSR and made it an industrial superpower that could defeat the Nazis, that could invent space travel, that had the biggest power plants in the world, raising millions of people up. I mean, that's real politics. And I don't hear that coming from a lot of the voices. And that's why I get frustrated. And I think that's why I'm generally condemned by so much of the left, because I'm not just trying to destroy the country. I'm not in this to just get the cathartic release of burn it down, tear it down. I actually want a better country. And I think that socialism and moving away from the rule of profits and bankers is the way to do it. If we had an economy that was organized to serve public good and not the profits of wealthy few, we could make sure that people had jobs and housing and education. People were getting smarter, that we were, having technological breakthroughs. I think we could do all of that. But I really don't get it. It's like if you put forward real solutions, and that's one thing I've looked to inspiration from the Larouche group for a long time. I mean, many brilliant proposals have come from your organization about trains and high-speed railway and about like aqueduct systems and all kinds of things. That's one thing I think your group has been very, very good at over the years, has been putting forward real policy solutions about how to rebuild America. And that's what we need more than anything right now. We need to rebuild the country.
And it's not just about the actual projects themselves either, right? What it really is too is by saying, when Kennedy said, hey, we're going to get to the moon, by setting society to that goal and having individuals work towards that goal together as a collective. I saw a study done that there's a $1 to $10 return, a $10 return per dollar spent on the moon mission.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an astronaut, the satellites, the way me and you are communicating right now, could be said to come from that space driver program. So it's important to realize that it's not just about shifting the mode of production. Also incurs a cultural change to where people are capable of making discoveries, of working productive jobs that allow their minds to become a part of what it is that they're working on.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I think, you were alluding to before, this speculation, money that just comes from other money, where no real value gets created in the process. Karl Marx called it fictitious capital. It's this money that just comes from other money. And that's what so much of the economy we live in is now. I mean, Bitcoin, crypto, and the derivative ripoffs that they had before the 2008 financial meltdown. And it's like there are all these mechanisms that capitalists have created where money comes out of other money, but no real value gets created. And I think Larouche, he talks about physical economy. I think that's the way he put it,
Yes.
Productive labor. I read, and that is being diminished. And instead we have this fake economy based on speculation, and a speculative bubble. In the end, after a while, you're just going to have a collapse because you're not creating real value. Human labor is the source of all wealth and all value. That's really when it gets down to it. And that's something that, that wasn't Karl Marx who first said that. Adam Smith said it before Karl Marx said it. And I believe there was one of the popes, he even said it as well, is that it is human labor that creates the wealth of the world. And it's, humans' ability to interact with their environment. And Frederick Engels, he said, the ability of human beings to force the environment to serve them and to reinvent their relationship with their environment. That is the source of wealth in the world. And that's something that I wish people could understand. You can't make money out of nothing. And much of the wealth that is being created in our Western capitalist economies right now is money made out of nothing, and eventually that's gonna fall apart. That's going to lead to a big collapse. And I think Larouche was warning the world about that back in the 1970s, and people didn't want to hear it. But he was right. He was absolutely right. And what he was saying was the same kind of thing that Marx was talking about when he talked about fictitious capital, the same kind of thing Lenin was talking about in his book Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, where he talked about how finance and bankers became dominant. I mean, this is a trend of the capitalist system. And as you impoverish people, as productivity decreases, as the actual physical economy gets smaller and weaker, eventually have a correction in the economy where the wealth and it all kind of comes down. That's my take on things.
Well, this is why I call myself Space Larouche, because I think space is such a neglected part. People, when you talk about space, people think that it's just a waste of money when we could be doing things on Earth. But I would love to see a space program that we could actually work together with Russia and China on. We could do mutual scientific research and development on. We could have a cultural exchange program where we exchange students, work with each other at each other's universities, and we actually launch a space program. There's helium-3 on the moon. Helium-3 isn't on Earth much because we have a magnetic sphere, so it bounces off of the Earth and lands on the moon. Now, helium-3, you could actually use it with nuclear energy. So just one ship to go to the moon and collect this, and China is actually working on seeing the feasibility of this. You could take helium-3 from the moon, bring it to Earth to power the Earth for the next 100 years. Imagine if we worked together with Russia and China on a kind of science driver project to reach Mars together, what we could accomplish. People are so worried about climate change. Imagine if we had a project to terraform Mars, or to learn how to terraform Mars, or to sustain life on the moon. I think if we could sustain life on the moon, we would be able to embrace any climate changes that seem to occur on Earth.
Yeah, and all these people that are so worried about the climate and they're just so concerned about it, why are they not really excited about what China's doing around fusion energy? Their only solution, it seems, is to reduce consumption. They're only interested in reducing consumption, making everyone
because they're
poorer.
Fascists. They're not actually interested in creating a government by and for the people. They're interested in creating anarchy. This is just undeniable. I mean, they're not interested in actually Promethean growth. They're angry at mom and dad. They think that if you make money, that makes you bad. And so the guy who owns a big rig truck, who owns his truck and makes money, he's greedy and a grubby guy because he's actually making money. No, if you're actually delivering value to people that keep society alive and thriving, those people need to be supported and appreciated because they're the reason that we're alive. So we need to support those kind of people, and we need to realize that the economy can only grow with the physical and scientific developments that we're talking about unleashing. That these leftists and these environmentalists are actively pushing against.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I'm writing super chats down, by the way. But Shane is saying about China is watching Ukraine closely and how that will never be allowed to happen in Taiwan. And the big thing that's been in the news. The big thing that's been in the news lately is that China brought Saudi Arabia and Iran back together, right? That they negotiated a reconciliation. And now we understand that even though China is very much aligned with Russia, that there is going to be a phone call between Xi Jinping and Zelensky in Ukraine. And that some people are speculating maybe China may be able to negotiate a resolution conflict. And that would be really, really great if there could be, peace in Ukraine, if the conflict, if they could reach a point of agreement and a ceasefire, that would be a great step forward. And that what China did with Saudi Arabia and Iran, that was a really, really big step forward. It was certainly a defeat for Israel that was trying to unite the Arab world against Iran and polarize the Arab world against Iran. That was what Netanyahu wanted to do. And that's what Trump was working with Netanyahu around doing. That's what Trump was doing in his Middle East trip. But, that's a really big step forward. But at the end of the day, China buys oil from both Saudi Arabia and Iran. And Saudi Arabia is trying to figure out what they're going to do now that they're not so vitally important to the United States because of fracking. And, Saudi Arabia, they're studying what Lee Kuan Yew did, and they're thinking about having some kind of development programs to diversify their economy beyond just oil. So they're tapped into what China's doing. Iran is very closely tied in with China, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And, there's a lot of very exciting. I was retweeting the supreme leader of Iran today, and he made some great statements today about infrastructure projects. Let me see what he said here. But the supreme leader of Iran was tweeting about China and infrastructure projects today. That's Khamenei, the leader of the Islamic Revolution. Let me pull up what he tweeted out today, because he usually tweets more religious kind of things or things directly related to Iran. But the supreme leader of Iran was tweeting about infrastructure and development. I will pull up those tweets. I'm scrolling down here to find those tweets here. It was very interesting to see what the supreme leader of Iran was tweeting out, but I think it's related to the deal that China brokered between the two countries. Let me just scroll down here and read what the supreme leader of Iran was tweeting out. At our last CPI conference, we made a point of having the supreme leader of Iran's latest book on the literature table, just as kind of a political statement. I think we had 2 copies of it, and we ended up selling at least one of them. But he wrote a book called 250-Year-Old Person. This is what the supreme leader of Iran tweeted out. The full launch of the North-South Transport Corridor will benefit Iran and Belarus, as well as Russia and the region. Both countries will work to make the corridor operational. That's what the supreme leader of Iran just tweeted out. Do you know about this project? This that he's referring to, this north, what is it called? This North-South Transport Corridor that Iran and Belarus and Russia are working on. That sounds very exciting, and I think that's related to the deal.
No, I don't. Thank you for bringing it to my attention, Caleb. It's exciting. I mean, it's amazing how on the one hand you have all these bank collapses here happening in the West, and then on the other hand you have more and more cooperation and plans for huge mega projects over on the other half of the world.
Yeah, before that, the supreme leader of Iran tweeted out, under the sanctions, Iran has been able to make enormous progress in different fields, including science and technology, the medical and biological sciences, space sciences, nuclear sciences, and nanotechnology. The harsh sanctions have enabled Iran to discover its domestic potential forces, and Iran has found many opportunities for progress during the past years while under sanctions. So he's basically saying that the sanctions are not going to wreck their economy. This is all really important. Oh, Kinky sent us a sticker, so thank you, Kinky.
Thank you.
So, yeah, Kinky is out in California. Are you originally from California, right, or Arizona? Are you from California or Arizona? I can't remember which.
I'm from California.
You're from California. I thought you were from California. You said something about Arizona, but okay. What is your background? Like before you got, watching my streams and got involved with Larouche or whatever, what is your background? What's your history?
Well, I got interested in politics at a young age because I could feel and see that the writing was on the wall intuitively, that there was crazy things happening during my generation, that things were going to be very different and we were going to go through some political turmoil. And when I was young, I also was very attracted to a certain political movement that started when a man went down an escalator and told us that he was going to make America great again.
Wow.
Now, when that happened, I started working with, I volunteered for a local congressman. And then eventually I went to community college. And at community college, I started learning a lot about leftist type things, typical college experience, And I met lots of people from different backgrounds. I met some socialists and some communists, and I was able to live with a group of communists in Los Angeles for a few months.
Oh, wow.
From there, eventually I was working during the 2020 primary, which kind of coincides with something we might talk about later with one of the books that you wrote on Kamala Harris. But I was preparing for Super Tuesday. And when I saw what happened on Super Tuesday, as far as in the blatant manipulation to get Joe Biden to be the nominee, that also coincided with the COVID occurrence happening all at once. I was on the ground talking to people about who were they planning on voting for, Bernie, what were their general thoughts, and I saw the manipulation happen first place when everyone dropped out at once and all supported Biden. And then they said after Biden won one race that there could be no more talk about any contest for the election because of COVID. And from there, I was like, the Democratic Party, Democratic Socialists, I was never too in on their woke things and some of their hardcore stances on some, coming from a Christian background, I was unattracted to a lot of that type of stuff. And then when I saw what happened there after another embarrassing situation with the 2016 Bernie campaign, which I also supported, even though I was a Trump supporter, I also liked Bernie Sanders quite a bit. And from then I was just disappointed, but I still wanted to listen to communists. And when I found you and I found Infrared, I was like, wow, these are people who actually, they want to make America great. They understand, they're not dumb PragerU people who are total frauds. They understand who are the people who are really responsible for what is happening and how can we develop solutions. And then when I discovered the Larouche organization and some of the ideas that they have, particularly about science and how science and energy and development and the human mind and us being made in the image of God and how central that is to really understanding government and to really understand the economy, which you actually gave a great speech on yesterday, Caleb, I must say. You put it very beautifully yesterday in your Monday night chat where you expressed a very similar sentiment. And so that's where I feel the heart of American politics is right now, is within this broader coalition of people who see and really do know that we are made in the image of God and that we are the most powerful beings in the universe as far as we are thus aware. And through labor and through scientific development and through music and culture, we can transform the world around us. In fact, we can transform the galaxy. And that is what government should be trying to unleash. And anyone who takes themselves seriously, calling themselves a communist, who isn't expressing something like that, is not a communist. They're exactly the type of anarchist or fascist we were speaking of earlier.
Yeah, well, in your speech at the Schiller Institute conference back in, was it September, I think, you quoted Che Guevara and his statement that revolutionaries are motivated by great feelings of love in your speech. And I have recently quoted that, and I quote that in the new book because I feel like people don't really understand what that means, right? But what he's getting at is that if you don't love the people, you can't be leading them. You can't expect them to follow you. You can't, come up with political solutions that are going to make their lives better. And that if it's not about love, if you cannot love the people in your community, the people in your neighborhood, the people in your state, the people in your country, if you don't love them, you really have no business in politics. And that unfortunately, this synthetic left that we talk about, you're talking about them being fascists, and you're absolutely right. They are not motivated by love. They do not love the country. They do not love the working class. They do not love the communities. They are motivated purely by anger and resentment and destructive impulses. It's interesting because, you read my book on Kamala Harris, and just recently I saw, I don't know if people saw, but there is a big push now among Democrats for Kamala Harris to be dropped from the ticket in 2024. I mean, a lot of people think Biden shouldn't even reelection run. But even among people that are supporting Biden, a lot of them are saying to drop Kamala Harris because she's less popular than Biden is. Biden is already quite unpopular. She's less popular than he is. And Elizabeth Warren was recently asked what she thought, and she gave like a vague answer. And now she's been forced to like grovel and apologize to Kamala Harris for basically vaguely hinting that, yeah, it'd be good if Biden would drop her from the ticket. And so it's this whole news story about how Elizabeth Warren has been calling the office of Kamala Harris to apologize, and they've not put her through to Kamala Harris to deliver her apology. But it's pretty wild. I mean, everything I wrote about Kamala Harris, I wrote it, before the election. My book was published in September. And there have been so many revelations since then that have confirmed everything I wrote about her personality, about how she treats her staff, about how people don't want to work with her, and that I wrote that book because I was approached by somebody who shall remain nameless, who knew her father. And he said, there's a story here. You've got to do something with this, Caleb. This is too big. The fact that her father is a communist, Marxist economist from Jamaica who was an advisor to Michael Manley, that she hates his guts, that he denounced her during the campaign, called her campaign a travesty of identity politics. This is really, really, really important stuff, to talk about. And it's weird because with Barack Obama, we knew everything. We knew about, his father from Kenya and his mother and lived in Hawaii and went to a Muslim school. We knew all this stuff about Obama. Kamala Harris, it's just like, she was a lawyer in California and she was a senator and now she's vice president. Vote for her. Are you racist? Now vote for her. Yeah, I mean, that's the argument with Kamala Harris. No one wants to really talk about her roots and all of that. So in light of this most recent revelation that she may be dropped from the ticket, I guess I'd like to hear your thoughts on the book. I've never really gotten your full feedback on the book. What did you think of the book?
Well, it feeds into a lot of my thoughts that I already had given my interactions with people who know more about the Kamala Harris situation, given what I do know about Kamala Harris, and the strategic way in which they use people's trauma and people's ego, both on a broad basis across our culture, but also particularly in powerful people, to manipulate them into pursuing certain directions. And I think that becomes even clearer when specifically focusing on Kamala Harris, Samantha Powers, and I know there was one other person who popped up in your book, but their name is escaping me.
Amy Klobuchar. Yeah, all three of them have basically the same life story of an abusive father. An abusive father. The mother and the father separate. They become estranged from the father. They hate the father. This is like, and it's weird, and it's very similar. And I talked about how, like, Obama and Bill Clinton had a very similar life story. Both of them never knew their fathers. Both of them were raised by single mothers. Both of them kind of learned to cheer up their single mothers, and were kind of like, that's Bill Clinton and that's Obama. And George W. Bush and Trump, both of them had very high achieving fathers, and they were, they were one of different brothers, and they were the screw up brother who never really got things together. Trump was sent to military boarding school. Bush was, kicked out. It was a party boy who was, getting in trouble in school and was arrested for drunken behavior at football games, and was, barely finished college, and that they both then had something to prove, being the screwed up son of a very high achieving father. Donald Trump's father was this very prominent real estate guy in New York City. George W. Bush, his father, had been the CIA director and eventually president, and that they had something to prove. And when people have something to prove, that makes them easy to manipulate. And that it's weird because, you can look at all this and just say it's a coincidence, but it's not a coincidence, right? Because, the president of the United States has way more power and influence than like you or me does, right? I mean, they make decisions every day in which millions of dollars and millions of lives are on the line, and being able to push their buttons is really important. And, like one thing, after I published that book on Kamala Harris, people talked about how Ben Rhodes, who was Obama's advisor, foreign policy advisor, Ben Rhodes wrote a book basically saying similar things to what I said about how Ben Rhodes, Samantha Power, Cass Sunstein, they worked really hard at pushing Obama's buttons and manipulating him to go into Libya. Obama was reluctant to go into Libya because he didn't want to be Bush. He didn't want to invade a country and not have a plan to get out of it or whatever. He said his greatest regret of his presidency was going into Libya. And it took them days to work on Obama to convince him to send the military into Libya. And that they told Barack Obama that Gaddafi was saying that when he went to Benghazi, he was going to go house to house to get the terrorists that were trying to overthrow the government. And they told Barack Obama that house to house means he's going to massacre the whole city. And you're going to be remembered as the president who didn't stop it. And you have to remember there's this whole narrative that Bill Clinton sat back and let a genocide happen in Rwanda, right? And that, oh, you're going to be you're the first black president, you're an African president, but you let a massacre happen in an African country. They worked on him. They knew exactly how to push his buttons, and he finally relented, right? So knowing, how to manipulate, the emotions and the feelings of people that are in powerful positions, that's something that you can be sure that American intelligence and all of them work really, really hard at doing. And that what's scary is you want people in positions of power that are clear-headed, right? That make decisions, that can just very coldly calculate what's the best for the country. But we see the opposite. They actively seek out people that are unwell, right? Yeah. That are traumatized, that have pain, Obama and Bill Clinton both never knew their fathers. Both of them had abusive stepfathers who beat up their mothers. And it's like they seek out people that have trauma, that have pain, that have something to prove. And that's horrifying. That's not the kind of person you want with their finger on the nuclear button, but that's who they're seeking out, because they want people they can manipulate. The more damaged people are, the more history people have. And we all have history, right? We all have trauma. We all have pain in our past. That doesn't make someone a bad person. But the fact that they're actively seeking out people whom they can manipulate, that is terrifying, right? We should want people that are able to be clear-headed and make the most calculated decision.
Of course. And that's why it's so important that we, people often joke about my organization and the fact that they teach about classical music, and they talk about reading the classics and actually having an understanding of, the Western tradition of the culture, and reading Plato, for instance. Reading Gorgias was so helpful for me. And we need people who really actually are thinking things through on the level of knowing what it actually means to know something. What is love? Like you talked about earlier, loving people. Well, it's going to be hard to love other people if you don't even know what love is. It's going to be hard to pursue truth and to pursue justice if you can't even be sure that such things actually exist. And what Larouche pointed out was that there was a movement within the United States, and you've pointed this out too, the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And what was their exact goal? To destroy any sense that Americans could have of what it actually means to pursue truth. What is truth? To destroy that, to destroy what it means to have justice, to destroy what it is to actually pursue science. And that's why you see things are so willy-nilly and backwards today, like with the extreme examples that you see in the culture war today, of just obvious derailment of our minds from actually thinking about what is the solutions and what is it that we can actually accomplish as humans, into just the pothole of just potty and just thinking about the most animalistic parts of ourselves.
No, one thing I got to tell you, when you talk about the Congress for Cultural Freedom, it just drives me up the wall that you get these people. There are a number of them on the internet who just say that's not true. That's a Larouchian conspiracy theory that never happened. It's like, no, it happened. Like this is a very widely circulated book, Finks, How the CIA Tricked the World's Best Writers. And you can read it. Joel Whitney talks about the Congress for Cultural Freedom, how it was founded in West Berlin, how Irving Kristol was the leader of it, how they, that's one book that describes it. This is another book called Who Paid the Piper? The CIA and the Cultural Cold War by Francis Stone Saunders. Another book, an academic book, goes into great detail about how the CIA manipulated these writers, reinvented leftism, funded Trotskyites, funded, what they call modern art and all kinds of stuff.
Well, and Caleb, look who came out of this. You could pull up your book right now, Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris was directly raised in those circles, that exactly what we're talking about with the rainbow. What was the name of the
rainbow sign? Yeah. And this is a book about Charles Manson. But yeah, in my book, I talked about how, when she was a child, there was a cultural center in San Francisco that she attended, in Oakland. And it was called Rainbow Sign, and it was funded by an African-American writer he's actually talked about extensively in Joel Whitney's book, How the CIA Tricked the World's Greatest Writers. And it was founded by a CIA asset, African-American writer, who set up this cultural center. And that's where Kamala Harris spent her childhood with her sisters, as they went to this cultural center in Oakland that was basically a CIA, place. It was basically being funded by the CIA, run by the CIA, as an alternative to Black nationalism and communism and revolutionary stuff, which was very big in Oakland at the time. There was this kind of vaguely African, kind of like what they're doing now with BLM, this kind of woke cultural center where she went with her sisters, that was pretty clearly some kind of CIA government operation to counter the rise of communism in the Black community. And that's where she got her training. And she sang in plays that they put on there, and she went to workshops, and yes, you're right about that. And I talk about that, and she talks about that in her autobiography. She talks about that. I mean, she's very open about that in her autobiography, the fact that she went there. Oh, but there's a question for you. John McCarthy says, Space, can you talk a little bit about the classes that Nick Brana and Jose Vega will be starting on how to do interventions? There you go. Go ahead. I don't know about this, so go ahead.
Sure. So Jose Vega has been doing an excellent job at showing up to interventions across the New York area. Jose actually lives in what is the poorest district in all of the United States, represented by a young man who is not a very, he's one of these so-called progressive Democrats, but he's been supporting this war in Ukraine, and he's not been answering questions on actually trying to, maybe do what China called for with their pointed plan of peace, and what Helga has been talking about with their 10 principles. They're not answering us on this. And so what we've been doing is interventions, talking at town hall events across the United States and saying, hey, we're not going to survive as a country if no nations want to do business with us because they think we're going to blow up their pipelines like we did with Germany.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to work together with other nations if you can apparently pull terrorist acts on them and just get away with it? So Jose has been killing it, and we've been having people, we've been inspiring people across the nation, frankly, to do more interventions, and I encourage people to do that. I'm actually talking Jose. Little known fact about Jose is that he's actually quite adept at computer science, and we have other people who we know who are good at computer science. And we're working on an app that could potentially scan the emails of different senators and congressmen who send out their emails every day and see when they're holding events and put all of that on a map so that we can organize together with the People's Party, with the Libertarian Party, with the Larouche organization, with CPI, to there's a town hall event coming up in the Minnesota 3rd District. Let's call up all of our contacts and see that we could actually make sure that we could get some people there to do an intervention. And so what Jose is going to be doing soon is he's going to be holding a class where he's going to be teaching people how to actually do interventions. So signing up for your congressman and senator's email list, preparing yourself. You don't also just have to yell. We did one intervention very recently on AOC that didn't go quite as viral as some of the stuff that Jose has been doing. But we sung an old Latin song called Dona Nobis Pacem, or Give Us Peace. And it was interesting because it's different from just yelling. And at first, people didn't know what was going on, but we were also holding these signs that said, fight for, let's have peace with Russia. And
Yeah.
while we were singing this beautiful Latin classical music, and it was very, people who actually went to that meeting and support AOC, they told us, hey, that was actually quite moving that you guys did that. So we're hoping to start thinking of doing interesting satirical type interventions. Our organization has gone very viral in the past, for instance, with the a lady in our organization at an AOC event years and years ago. Trump retweeted this, where she was like, "You must eat the babies to save the planet. Eat the
Right.
babies. We have to kill the babies." So there's lots of ways that we can make our voices heard, and actually it's not just about making your voice heard, but it's also about kind of having a Socratic moment with the people and with the Congress. When you could do things satirically, or you could say things in a powerful way, you could have a huge impact. People these days, they say, well, there's nothing I could do about this Russia-Ukraine war. But I'm here to tell you, and what Jose has done shows you, that you can have a huge impact. And you could do that because of the beauty and power of your mind. So that is what Jose is going to be really reflecting on and trying to teach to people. And you're welcome to join it. I don't know exactly when that's scheduled for, but anyone who is interested in that, you're free to follow me on Twitter and shoot me a direct message, or follow and give a direct message to Jose. But I'm happy to help people with that. And I heard that the CPI is even interested in doing some intervention soon.
We are interested, and we have members of our organization who would like to be part of those trainings and workshops. So be sure to let us know when those trainings are, because we would like to be in on that as well. We have done some interventions in the past, and we'd like to do more of them. Yeah, well, I'm thinking about what's going on in the world right now, and how it seems like the Biden administration is pushing more and more hostility to China. It was the weather balloon nonsense. Remember that? Who can forget that, right? The balloon apocalypse, right? There was a balloon, and there was that, and then now they're trying to say that China somehow is responsible for COVID, when they're not even sure that it came from this lab, and this lab was fully paid for by the United States, and Dr. Fauci was involved in it. There's just so many. So yeah, someone is saying, I heard that Dylan Burns ran from a debate with Liam at Rage Against the War Machine. Did that happen? What's this about? I don't know about this. Tell me what's the story here.
Well, I did get to meet Dylan Burns at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. For people who don't know, maybe Dylan Burns, I don't know how he blew up, but he's a very pro-Ukrainian guy. I don't want to demean him, but he's an interesting fella. He told me when I met him that he's looking forward to going to Amsterdam to do magic mushrooms right before he goes into Ukraine to do war footage. And that really struck me. I was like, wow, mushrooms before war, huh? That's interesting. Anyway,
worked for the Vikings.
He's a big fan of Ukraine. He poses himself kind of as a socialist, but not really. I mean, he really doesn't know anything about socialism, but he criticizes slightly the Biden administration while being one of their biggest cheerleaders for their foreign affairs. So I met Dylan Burns here, and it was funny because online he's a very vicious and nasty person, but in person he's not really about that smoke. And I'm not really a very aggressive person either. So I just kind of approached him and started asking him some questions about the war, and I actually was able to film it. And I just haven't gotten to putting it up. I could put it up, and then I'm also planning on maybe doing I got his contact information. Maybe I might debate him soon with Simon Miller.
Well, good for you. I hope you do that. That would be a productive thing to do. I mean, engaging these people can sometimes be good. I mean, don't expect to change their minds, but some people in their audience might, be interested in what you have to say. But no, when I said it worked for the Vikings, I was actually referencing where the term berserk came from. When you ever hear someone went berserk, that referred to certain Viking warriors that would take hallucinogens before they went into battle. They would eat hallucinogenic mushrooms before they went into battle, and they would act crazy. And they were called the berserkers. And that's where the phrase "go berserk" actually comes from. It comes from. So I guess there's a tradition of people going to Norway and taking magic mushrooms before they go to war. But there you go. I just, that's what immediately came to mind. But it's wild. It's wild. I will say one thing that, as far as the whole thing, they're pushing now, everybody, if you're suffering from mental illness, they're pushing people to use hallucinogens as if that's going to be a cure. And I mean, I think there might be some rare instances where it's like someone has trauma and so they take a hallucinogen and it helps them remember it in a different way. And maybe there's something, but the way they're pushing them now is insane. I mean, they're pushing them. It's like, oh, you're depressed. What you need to do is go do some hallucinogens. Oh, you're feeling anxiety. Go take some hallucinogens. And it's really scary, honestly. I mean, it's a full court. I mean, the news media is pushing it, and so many news stories and so many ads, and it's really disturbing. I mean, I think if someone is having psychological problems, the last thing they need, for the most part, I mean, I'm not a doctor, okay, but the last thing they need for the most part is a drug that's going to cause them to see things that are not there, to lose touch with their senses. I mean, it just can't be good for people. What do you think?
Well, I'm a pretty young man. I'm around 23 years old, and I come from California, and I don't know about the rest of the United States, but in California, among the young people, it's really been pushed on, and most of the young people I know have definitely had experiences with hallucinogenic drugs, and I have seen firsthand young people who take these drugs and they claim that, it makes them feel a lot better and that they're much more in touch with different things and, God or something like that. And I don't know, but I do know that there's a lot of people who they go into kind of a spiral where they kind of lose a little bit of touch with reality. And I've seen that firsthand with a couple of people. And like you said, especially when people are dealing with mental illnesses or with trauma, it could be very dangerous. And then I also saw an article years back that the British were discussing developing novel psychedelic compounds, as well as developing other military solutions to give to soldiers that would enable them to not question any of the orders that were given to them, and to be more ruthless and to not have to sleep and things of that nature. And within that article, they said, oh, well, the Chinese and the Russians, they're evil. So, of course, they're going to be building this stuff. So that means we have to build it so that we can respond to when the Russians and the Chinese do it. And from that day, I've also been seeing that now on the stock market, there are stocks that are developing new novel psychedelic compounds that are supposedly going to be used to treat depression, but are also being investigated into by the military-industrial complex that might end up being used to those purposes. So meanwhile, you have young black males being thrown in jail for trading the drugs that the CIA and the intelligence operations are bringing into the country. But yet you can openly invest on the stock market into companies that are creating psychedelic compounds to give the soldiers so that they ruthlessly kill people. What a joke.
Yeah. Well, and the more you read about like Project MK Ultra, and I think there's that book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, and all of that. That was some really evil stuff the government was doing back then. I mean, you read about Timothy Leary and that whole LSD cult or whatever, the League of Spiritual Discovery. And it was basically a government sponsored operation to get as many people to fry their brains on drugs as possible. I mean, they were just distributing LSD everywhere. They had these huge open air concerts where there'd be free drugs just given out to everybody. And you look at how many people got badly hurt by that. I mean, it was a lot of people, and it shows they don't really care about the domestic population, you know?
Well, you can see that there are stories that, you know, hippies will even tell each other of at Grateful Dead concerts, a plane flying over top of them and then opening up and dropping a very specific type of LSD that they called like electric sunshine or something like that, that they're just raining on top. I mean, how is that organized? See, what people don't realize is that, well, look what's happening in El Salvador right now.
Mm-hmm.
The state doesn't want crime. Guess what happens? No more crime. What Bukele has done is now you have a record low murder rate in a country where there used to be a murder every single day. It was one of the highest murder rates in the entire world. Look, if you don't want crime, the government can stop crime.
Mm-hmm.
This is the reason why we have crime, the reason why we have drugs, and the reason why the cartel is so crazy in Mexico. We have Republicans talking about invading the cartel. We create the cartel.
Yeah.
We're the ones running this. If they wanted that to stop, they could stop it.
Yeah. No, one great thing that we published, the Center for Political Innovation, we published this volume, Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left. And this is a compilation of some of the articles Fidel Castro wrote after he retired. He had this like daily column in Granma, the Cuban like daily newspaper. And one of the first articles we quote in here is him exposing Project MK Ultra. And, you know, Cuba has some of the strictest drug laws of any country in the world. I mean, if you ever go to Cuba, I was a leftist. I never actually went, but I was being trained to go to Cuba. And I remember that was one thing they made clear, you know, it's a room full of leftists with long hair and, you know, and they're like, do not bring marijuana here. Do not bring any drugs here. If you do, you'll be staying here for a couple years in prison. You know, they made that abundantly clear. Cuba is really not a drug using country. And in one of his columns that we have in here, it's called The World Government. And it's like a 2-part column. He goes into great detail about how, you know, LSD was very much used to, you know, try to control and weaken the anti-Vietnam War protest movement, you know, how it was used to weaken the civil rights movement. And he goes into great detail talking about it, about Project MK Ultra and all this. This is Fidel Castro. If anyone's got communist credentials, it's this guy. So there you go. The guy ahead of MK Ultra was maybe a serial killer. What does that mean? Ahead of MK Ultra? Are you talking about I know this is one of the books on MK Ultra, the Sidney Gottlieb, the CIA and the Search for Mind Control. Is this what you're talking about, Sidney Gottlieb? You know, he was the guy who was running the MK Ultra program. This is a book by Stephen Kinzer that came out a couple years ago about Sidney Gottlieb and the MK Ultra program. It's a wild story about the evil things they were doing to the population. And it really goes to show, you know, they always attack these countries and they say, oh, well, we're trying to keep us safe. We're trying to keep us safe. You know, the government is trying to keep us safe, you know, and it's like, oh, we're invaded Afghanistan because of 9/11. We just got to keep everyone safe. And, you know, the reason they're reading all our phone calls and emails, they just want to keep us safe. And it's like, they don't want to keep us safe. They really don't. I mean, if they're distributing drugs the way they are, if they're, you know, driving so much instability, openly talking about reducing the population, they're not interested in keeping us safe by any means. They see the population as an annoying horde that must be managed. And I think our responsibility as revolutionaries is to see the population as the opposite, as full of potential. Yes. These are people that could become engineers and scientists. These are people that could become a source of a whole renaissance here on the American continent, right? And we have a government that kind of just wishes the population would go away so they can collapse the United States into their global financial system, you know, as kind of just, you know, Southern California and New York City as trading hubs in their global financial empire. We have to see the United States as a huge swath of land and a population and natural resources that could be made into a productive place. I think that with China teaming up with the United States, with Russia teaming up with the United States, we could build like an amazing high-tech country. We really, really could. But we would have to have the view that growth is good. We'd have to have a leadership that understood that growth is good and that it was in the interest of humanity to you know, soar to new heights. That's kind of my view.
100%. And this is where, Trump, he says we got to take a quantum leap. And he's, of course, made the famous saying, make America great again. But you're not going to be able to do that without working together with Russia and China, without working together with other nations. And you can look and see what China has been doing all over the world. I recently wrote an article on one Belt and Road project, the East African crude oil pipeline. Now, of course, you have all these environmentalists who are saying that, oh, this is such a bad project. But then you look, China's national offshore oil company, it has a 28% stake. They're majorly invested in building a state-of-the-art science laboratory at Makerere University. They're exchanging students to the Chinese Petroleum University and other universities. I mean, this is a science driver program, and we're talking about the country with the youngest population in the world, Uganda. We're talking about a country where 80% of people have to go and chop wood to be able to heat their home, to be able to cook their food. I mean, why is it that the West thinks that they should be able to tell those people, hey, you can't have a petroleum industry, you can't have energy, go chop down that wood to survive?
Yeah.
That is what I like to call green colonialism, because you're restricting these people from actually developing and being able to have sovereignty and not to be dependent on primarily Western countries, by telling them that they're going to pollute the environment just by actually moving forward in their mode of production.
Absolutely. No, you couldn't be more right. And I think that, understanding that Larouche put forward, that right now the fight is between those who believe in economic growth and those that are trying to save capitalism by degrowing. That's really, he hit the nail on the head. And it's become more true in the aftermath of his life than it was when he first started commenting that way. I think back in the 1970s, he was kind of an outlier among Marxists, because he was saying, well, actually, the main danger are the Eastern establishment, or the liberals, where most of the left was focusing on the military industrial complex because of the Vietnam War. And there we go. I think Larouche, we now see the results of that cultural revolution, they called it, that the 60s radicals brought on, and how it's made the population more easy to control, more easy to manipulate. It's led to neoliberal economics and impoverishment of the population. He was right in many, many ways. And he was very tuned into certain trends in culture and in society. And then he also wrote a book, Earth's Next 50 Years. I think it was one of the last books he wrote before he died, that there's a chapter called The Eurasian Future, where he basically, it's just like 2004. He's predicting that Russia and China and the Belt and Road Initiative, all of this, none of this had really come into fruition, but he lays it all out in there. And that's why I encourage people to read Larouche's writings. There's so much there. Sometimes it can be a little bit, it can be a little bit hard. You have to kind of sift through it to find the specific points he's making. It's not exactly as clear and laid out as some of us would like, but the ideas that are there are very profound. And that's why I encourage people to read Larouche. I have volume 1. I was actually really disappointed. I bought volume 1 of Lyndon LaRouche's, of his collected works. And I was disappointed because I already had every single book in there. So I'm waiting for volume 2 to come out, because hopefully it'll have some stuff I don't have. So there you go.
Volume 2 will be coming out, and it will have some never before published things that were within the organization, private things that he said within the organization. So that'll be interesting, some never before seen things. And I want to push back that he is clear. It's just that he points out so many, and he'll name drop so many different things and take all of these different concepts, especially these scientific concepts, to where, at least with me, I'll be like, oh, I need to Google that real fast, or I need to read that book, or I need to read that book before moving on. And that can be tough, but making, one thing that we like to say within our organization is that with a lot of these famous authors or these great statesmen or philosophers like Lyndon LaRouche, like a Plato, like Alexander Hamilton, like Friedrich Schiller, really reading them and going through them, studying their ideas, it's almost like you're making a friend, a new friend for life that you can have a dialogue with through their ideas within their books. And that's why, I'm very glad to be a friend with you, Caleb, because of the Marxists, especially in the West and within the United States, you are pushing forward the beating back what has been done to the United States for years and years and years by the Congress for Cultural Freedom, by the New Left, by these crazy, anarchists. Really, I don't even want to call them socialists, even though that's what they call themselves, because they are anarchists. And what you have done by bringing back a sort of a Promethean Marxism and talking about how people are made in the image of God, and we need to bring that, we need a state that brings that out of people, that brings that higher quality, that beauty that it resides within people out. That is what is necessary for today's movement. That is what is necessary for today's America. And that's how we're going to make America great again.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Liam. Where, other than your Twitter, which is Space Larouche, your handle is just Space Larouche. Where can people else can they find your work? Is there another place they can learn more about you?
Sure. Well, I would really appreciate if anyone interested in knowing more about the Larouche organization would check out the Executive Intelligence Review. I write articles in there occasionally. I know Caleb is a frequent reader of our daily briefings. We have had a team going at it for 40, 50 years, doing direct counterintelligence analysis, discussions of the solutions, and even scientific work that is within our magazine. So that briefing is what I use. I know it's what Jackson Hinkle, for instance, likes to read, the Executive Intelligence Review. And if you guys would support us by becoming readers of the Executive Intelligence Review, I think it would be very fruitful for you.
Well, very good. Well, thank you for coming on, Liam. It was a great chat, great conversation. We'll have you back sometime. Good luck. Good luck with everything.
Caleb. I appreciate you. Have a nice night.
Yeah. Very good. Well, that was great. It was really, really fun to have my friend Liam on there. So why don't we now do our roll call, where I'll call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We'll find out who is on the other side of the camera. And then I'll answer super chat questions for the rest of the night. So who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Who's with us? Jenny Lynn thinks it's fantastic stuff. Very good. Very, very good. Very good. Names and locations. We got St. David, Bermuda, Saviero, Filani in Mexico, Rice from Adelaide, Australia, Hugo from the Netherlands, Temple City, California, Love LaRoucheites, Morgan in Philadelphia, Chad in Florida, Orange County, Molly McGuire, Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Lori Spencer in Oklahoma, Steve and Ann in Georgia, Stephen in Boston, Colin in Greensboro, Chris in Salt Lake City, Sarah out in Idaho, Alex in Beijing, Jim in Harrisburg, Patch in Arizona, A1 and A2 in Palo Alto. I've been to Palo Alto. Zephyr in Eugene. Bob Troy in New York. Eco Whiskey from Melbourne, Australia. John McCarthy in Chicago. Shout out to you, John. John does a lot of important work. Shout out to you, John. Who else is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. We got Gina from Fort Smith. We got Brian Schaefer from Illinois. We got Alan Reyes in South Korea. We got Sydney, Australia. Beaches, hot and sunny, 14-hour Friday. We got Tyler out in Missouri. Shout out to you, Tyler, my favorite English teacher. We got Farron in Oklahoma. Our Oklahoma audience is growing these days. This is significant. We're growing in terms of our audience. All right. Anyone else? Names and locations. Always good. We got Sarah in Idaho. All right. We got Midwest Gang, right? There we go. We got Mariah in North Carolina. Mariah is always with us. We got Anna Cortez in Washington, Alan in Chicago, Sam from Missouri, right? Wow, we got more Missouri people too. Our Missouri audience is growing also. That's interesting, right? We got a Missouri audience that's growing, and we got an Oklahoma audience. I got to get out there, right? I was in Lynn Valley, Kansas a while back. We got Charlie in Ottawa, Canada, Maddie in California. Good stuff. Good stuff. Duran in Japan. Very good. Very, very good. Very good. All right. Four Oaks, North Carolina. Shane Rossi in Manhattan. I met you the other day, Shane. Good to meet you, Shane. All right. Jan in New Orleans. Welcome, Jan. Hello to all. Very, very good. Says FW Carr. FW Carr. All right. All right. So I got a couple I got one super chat here, just one. So if you got more stuff to ask me about, send me a super chat, because if not, it might be a really short second half of the show here. But quick reminder, for those of you who maybe didn't hear me say it before, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that we're having an amazing, important conference in Washington, D.C. March 25th and 26th, we're having the Summit Against Hypocrisy, a very, very important conference that we are having in Washington, D.C., a very important conference. And I think you ought to be there. I think you ought to register. Registration link is down below. You ought to sign up and come and join us. It's going to be a really, really great event. Scott Ritter will be there. Peter Coffin will be there. Garland Nixon will be there. Jyoti Brar from Britain will be there. It's going to be quite an event. So if you haven't registered, go ahead and register. It's going to be a really awesome event. Music, speeches, audience discussions, Q&A. It's going to be great. It's a 2-day anti-imperialist gathering that we are having in Washington, D.C. So sign up. And, this might be the kind of event that if you have a friend who you think could be won to these kind of politics, but you don't think they're going to be won, they just don't have the open-mindedness to watch a YouTube video or something, bring them along. Bring them along. Bring along a friend. Bring a friend along and just say, hey, I'm going to this event. There's a friend of mine who's going to give a speech, or why don't you come watch me give a speech, or whatever. There's going to be some music or whatever. Bring a friend. It's free, right? We will ask a donation at the door, but it's optional. No one's required to pay to get in. Why don't you bring a friend to this event? That would be awesome. Sneak your friend in and let this be their introduction to the anti-imperialist movement, to the city building tendency. Let them come and see that we're not evil, Nazbol, white supremacist cultists. Let them see that we're just a group of people who want to stop the wars and build a better country. Bring a friend. That's my challenge to all of you. All of you who are coming, bring a friend. Bring a friend to the Summit Against Hypocrisy. Bring a friend. That is my challenge. Bring a friend to see Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter and Peter Coffin and Jyoti Brar. Bring a friend. Bring a friend. Bring a friend. That is my challenge for the Summit Against Hypocrisy. Now, if you can't make it to the summit, you can always give a donation. Donations are always appreciated. And if you want to just give a donation, you can do that. You can give a donation. That is an option. So there you go. You can do that. The donate link is down below in the chat. It's down below the video. So just down there, you can give us a donation. If you can't make it, that'd be great. That'll help cover the housing for our out-of-town volunteers. That'll help cover, Peter Coffin is actually making a documentary about it. He's going to make like a mini documentary film about the Summit Against Hypocrisy. Can you believe it? And so that's going to be awesome. You'll get to see kind of the behind the scenes. You'll get to see us rehearsing. You'll get to see interviews with people that are part of it. It's going to be tremendous. It's going to be tremendous. You have no idea what's in store. There's going to be a lot of surprises that weekend. We're putting a lot of resources into doing this conference because it needs to be done and because it needs to be done. So I hope you sign up for the Summit Against Hypocrisy. You'll get to meet Liam. He's going to be there. Liam, if you liked Liam, he'll be there. So there we go. There we go. All right. Mariah has a super chat. Did I miss your discussion of the banking crisis and the bailouts? I'm trying to encourage people to leave big banks and join credit unions. crisis. Credit unions. All righty. I wrote that down. Any more super chats people have, I will answer them here in the second half of our program. So the first super chat question, basically it was from Shane, and he said, China is watching Ukraine, and Taiwan will never be allowed to go that way. And I think that is absolutely true. China does not want to have a big bloody mess in Taiwan. Why? Because they consider Taiwan to be part of their country. And Taiwan considers itself to be part of China. The legal name of Taiwan is the People's Republic of China. It's the Republic of China, not the People's Republic. But Taiwan also considers itself to be China. It just has a different government. It has the Republic of China. And the idea of Taiwan breaking away and becoming another country wouldn't be good for the people on Taiwan, and it wouldn't be good for the people on the Chinese mainland. And China doesn't want to have a big bloodbath on their own territory. They don't want to have a fight with their own citizens, their own people. They would like to eventually see the gradual reunification of the two Chinese governments, the Republic of China, that's the old government of Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalist KMT, and the People's Republic led by the Communist Party. They'd like to see them eventually merge with each other. There is a breakaway from the KMT that has a role in the government of the People's Republic. A lot of people don't know that China is not technically a one-party state. The Communist Party is the major party, but there are other parties in China, and one of those parties is the left KMT, or the left Kuomintang, which is a breakaway from the official Chiang Kai-shek Kuomintang that aligned with the Communist Party and helped establish and found the People's Republic. And, there would be room in the People's Republic government for the Kuomintang KMT party, I think, to be part of it. And that China would like to see a reunification, just like North Korea would like to see peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. They would like South Korea and North Korea to all be one country, and one country where the Korean Workers' Party, the Communist Party that's in the north, as well as the political parties in South Korea, could all share power, and they could govern one country peacefully. There's not two Koreas. There's one Korea. Korea is divided because of the Cold War and because of geopolitics and because of U.S. imperialism. And millions of people have been killed on the Korean Peninsula as the U.S. imperialists battled against the Korean Workers' Party and China and the Soviet Union that were backing the Korean Workers' Party. And, you look at that history there, it would absolutely be in the interests of the whole world for there to be a unified government, peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And on top of that, it would also be in the interest of the world for there to be one China. And there already is one China, except there's a section of China that's governed by this Republic of Taiwan, this Republic of China that's on the island of Taiwan. Well, it'd be good if there was a unified government for all of China, right? Just like Hong Kong returned to China, just like, Tibet is an autonomous region, along with the Uyghur regions is an autonomous region. There ought to be one China, including the government, including the island of Taiwan. So there you go. That's my thoughts on that. Now, the next super chat question, and again, if people have more super chats, we're getting towards the end here. Is someone said, did I miss your discussion of the banking crisis? I'm trying to get people to leave big banks and join credit unions. Well, when Liam and I were talking, we discussed that. I made the point that I made, well, here, I'll write the super chat down before I get to that. All right. Okay. All right. All right. Those are two very good points. So as far as the banking crisis, the point that I made about the banking crisis is that it's rooted in a bigger crisis of overproduction. Under capitalism, the worker can never buy back what he produces. The wages paid out in the process of creating the product are never enough for the worker to buy back what he produces. There's always more of the product being created than there is purchasing power on the part of the worker to buy it back. Then, on top of that, you have the problem that as technology advances, you have what is called the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, which is that only human labor creates value. Only human labor creates value. And because only human labor creates value, and the capitalist can only extract profits from human labor, when the amount of labor that goes into a product is decreased, when machines take up more and more of production and human labor is decreased, the amount of profit, the rate of profit that a capitalist can make off the product he produces also goes down. This is called the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. And we are living in the aftermath of the computer revolution. And the computer revolution is really the biggest technological leap we've ever seen. And with artificial intelligence and 3D printers, and I mean, it's just insane what computers can do now. Check out ChatGPT. And because of that, the role of human labor in production has been drastically diminished. And great economic crises under capitalism tend to come after big technological leaps. And I talk about this. The entire first chapter of this book is just about the economic crisis we're in, because the political crisis, the cultural crisis, the geopolitical crisis, all of that is rooted in the economic crisis. The economic crisis is the foundation. It is the economic crisis that is underlying all of this. And it is a crisis of overproduction. And I always point people toward Marxist economics. If you want to understand the economic crisis, you can read the summation in the first chapter of my new book, or you can read this great book, The Future is Up to Us by Nelson Puri. It's online. The PDF is for free online. It's a great book. It's a great book. You can also read High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy, also up online for free. You can also read, this is a good book. It's called Low Wage Capitalism, What the New Globalized High-Tech Imperialism Means for the Class Struggle in the United States. All three of these books describe the problem of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profits, and how it combined with the issue of the computer revolution. And don't feed the trolls, folks. Just let them go away. So, the computer revolution has led capitalist production to a whole new level. And it's created a long-term economic crisis, much like the Great Depression was created by Henry Ford's innovations in the assembly line production, much like World War I came after many technological leaps and many panics and economic crises that necessitated the imperialists going to war, right? And that the foundations of the economic crisis are rooted in the problem of overproduction and the technological leaps that we're living under. That is what I understand very thoroughly to be true. I also recommend, if people want another insight, you could read Dialectical Economics by Lynn Marcus. Lynn Marcus is what Larouche called himself before he reverted to, that was his pen name, before he went back to calling himself Lyndon LaRouche. So there you go. There you go. But yeah, that's my take on that. Look, I mean, and I talked about how we have in the United States a lack of physical economy. We have speculation, which is money made out of other money. And that's what we have a huge amount of in the United States. It's money made out of other money. And when you have money that's being made out of other money, real value is not being created. And when real value is not being created, it leads to a fallout. Artificial money. Marx called it fictitious capital. Fictitious capital doesn't really add any value. It's human labor that creates value. Money made from other money doesn't create value. So there we go. There we go. There's a super chat that I missed. Can it be said that Russia suffers from an ideological vacuum? That's an interesting question. There we go. All right. The next super chat says BreadTube hates Bitcoin. Russia is mining it for anti-imperialist purposes. That's true. That's true. Okay. And when I said that the problem with Bitcoin is that its value that's not being based on any physical economy, that's true. However, I don't think crypto should be outlawed, right? Crypto, it's something they can't control. And that's why they don't like it. They don't like that they can't control it, and that it tends to be the lower level capitalists that are really into Bitcoin and really into cryptocurrencies because they can't control it, right? Because it's more independent, right? It's not under the domination of the big banks, and that what the person said about Russia, and that there's a lot of these Bitcoin guys who end up fleeing to Russia. I know there's been a number of people that have been part of the Bitcoin world that have been targeted by the American government, and they fled to Russia. And it's, I'm not saying that Bitcoin is evil, but I'm just saying that the value of Bitcoin, if Bitcoin goes up or Bitcoin goes down, does that change how much wealth there is in society? Do people's living standards go up or down? I mean, no, it is fictitious capital. However, it's fictitious capital that is not part of their whatever you want to call it, their domain. They don't control it, so it can play a different role. I guess my point is that it's speculation, and that's what it is. Cryptocurrency is largely a speculative market, and because of that, it's part of this overall bubble that I'm talking about. Right? It's not real value being created. That's my point. But the fact that people can use it, people can be off the grid, can use it for anti-imperialist purposes, I'm not against it, and I have crypto, so there you go. There you go. There you go. The next one, someone said these drugs trigger schizophrenia, and they do. I mean, that's kind of what happens when one takes a hallucinogen. Is one becomes schizophrenic. One sees things that are not there. One hallucinates. It's not good. It's not good. I've talked about how I was really into the musical Hair when I was a teenager, and I thought Timothy Leary was very awesome and exciting. But at the same time, the reality is that hallucinogens are not good for people in general. I mean, and what the government did with Project MK Ultra was very evil. It was very evil. And we talk about that. And we published Fidel Castro's book, Fidel Castro Exposes the Synthetic Left, where he gets into great detail about it. All righty. Next super chat question we've got here. Can it be said that Russia suffers from an ideological vacuum? I wouldn't put it that way. I would say that Russia, communism as a movement, didn't have the ability to retake power after the fall of the Soviet Union. Many people speculate that it's very likely that the 1996 elections were won by the Communist Party, that Yeltsin did not really win those elections, that there was just widespread election fraud to make sure Yeltsin got reelected and that Zhuganov did not get elected. But regardless, Zhuganov was not able to mobilize people out into the streets. He wasn't able to get people out into the streets to go out and fight, and that he wasn't able to mobilize the energy, the momentum among the population. That the Communist Party, at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union, the reason that the Soviet Union fell is because of the fact that they just didn't have the ability to mobilize the population. They didn't, even though the majority of people in the former Soviet Union wanted to keep the Soviet Union, they didn't want to restore capitalism. They didn't have the ability. They didn't have the ability to mobilize the masses to go out and fight to preserve socialism. If you look at the events that happened, they talk about, I think it was Black September, the constitutional crisis in Russia of 1993, where Yeltsin dissolved the parliament. The Communist Party in Russia, they're not going to take power, right? I mean, they're just not going to take power. And so that raises the question of Russian anti-imperialism, where is it at? Well, starting really with the rise of Putin, you started to see the rise of what they call the new Russian patriotism. And there's a lot written about it. Alexander Dugin is a big part of the new Russian patriotism. The Russian Orthodox Church is a big part of the new Russian patriotism. Nostalgia for the Soviet Union and for Stalin defeating the Nazis is a big part of it. But there's other parts of it as well. Traditional Russian culture, and there is a movement they now call the New Russian Patriotism. The Communist Party is part of it, but they are not all of it. There's just especially since the war in Ukraine has gotten going, you have the New Russian Patriotism. You have the worldview that is espoused in Russia, the belief that, that they believe in development. That's a really big part of what they believe. They also are very proud of their history. They're critical of the Western system. They're very collective in the way they think about things. The New Russian Patriotism, you can read about it. So I wouldn't say Russia's in an ideological vacuum. I wouldn't say that. What's your opinion of Pierre Trudeau, specifically with regard to close ties? I don't know who Pierre Trudeau is. I'm going to have to Google that. I don't even know who that is. Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau, former Prime Minister of Canada. I don't know my Canadian history enough. I just don't know my history of Canada enough to comment on that. I really just don't. I really don't. I really don't know my history, and I can't comment on that. I really can't. I mean, Canada has always been part of the Western imperialist club. I mean, it always has been. So, but of course, Lori would know that. She's all over Canadian radio. So maybe ask Lori that. So there we go. There we go. Anything else folks want to ask me about here tonight? Anything else, right? I thought that was a great chat we just had with Liam. I like bringing guests on. It's good to have guests on there. Since we're talking about the finances and all of that, why don't I read to you a little bit from the new book? Why not? Why not, right? I'll just read to you some from the new book. Since we're talking about economics, I will read to you some of the first chapter of the new book. Right? And let me mention that everyone who comes to our conference in DC will get a free copy of this book. Oh. Thoughts on China as capitalist claimed by radical socialists who believe it works for the people that maintain control of power. All right. All right. Okay. So why don't I answer the China question first? Then I'll read a little bit of the book, and then I'll answer any more super chats that come in. Why is China socialist? Oh. Have you seen the documentary Israel and the Assassinations of Kennedy? I have not seen that documentary. I haven't seen it. But anyway, I will continue. As far as China, the reason that China is socialist is because socialism is not synonymous with state ownership. And I would encourage you to go and read a document called Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. This is considered one of the most important works of Marxism by Friedrich Engels. And in it, Friedrich Engels explains what socialism is. This is what he says. The proletariat seizes the public power, and by means of this transforms the socialized means of production, slipping from the hands of the bourgeoisie into public property. By this act, the proletariat frees the means of production from the character of capital that they have borne thus far, and gives their socialized character complete freedom to work itself out. And here's the important part. Socialized production upon a predetermined plan becomes henceforth possible. The development of productive forces makes the existence of different classes in society an anachronism. So what the point is, right, is that the proletariat seizes control of the economy. And by this act, the proletariat frees the means of production from the character of capital they have thus far borne, meaning that the means of production don't function to make profits for private owners any longer. The means of production operate for the benefit of society overall. And thank you, Herb Bryant, for the super chat. Have you seen it? Thoughts on the theory? I haven't seen it, and I don't know enough about it. So at that point, the means of production function, as Friedrich Engels puts it, production upon a predetermined plan. That's the definition of socialism. Socialism is when society takes control of the economy, and the economy isn't functioning simply to make profits for private owners, but rather on the basis of a predetermined plan. That's what socialism is. And in China, yes, there's a lot of private businesses, but those private businesses, they don't bear the character of capital. They don't do what is just in their interest. They are forced by the state to work upon a predetermined plan. They have 5-year economic plans. They're controlled and forced to work in the interest of society overall, right? Or if you want to go to the Communist Manifesto, let's go to the Communist Manifesto. What does the Communist Manifesto say socialism is, right? Communist Manifesto. Again, it's really interesting how none of these socialists have ever bothered to read what socialism actually is. They all I'll answer that in a minute. What does the Communist Manifesto say socialism is? This is what the Communist Manifesto says. We have seen above that the first step in the revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to the position of the ruling class and win the battle for democracy. So the rich are defeated, and we have a government that truly represents the people, with the working class majority in power, winning the battle for democracy. So the first step is the working class is in power. They win the battle for democracy. Then the proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest, by degree, all capital from the bourgeoisie. So that means not all at once, by degree. So the proletariat takes power. We have a working class government. But it doesn't necessarily make everything public property. To wrest by degree the capital from the bourgeoisie, meaning at different times, different amounts. To centralize the instruments of production into the hands of the state, meaning that they plan out the economy. You don't have the chaos of the market. So you've centralized the economy. You start having central planning of the economy. And to increase the total productive forces as rapidly as possible, meaning that the state, with centralization of the economy, raises the productive forces. That's what the Communist Manifesto says that socialism is. Okay, so I just read to you Engels, what he said socialism is. I just read to you Marx, what he said socialism is. But let's go further. Let's do Lenin. State and revolution. What does Lenin say socialism is? In the State and Revolution, what does Lenin say that socialism is? All right, what is it? The first phase of communist society. The means of production are no longer the private property of individuals. The means of production belong to the whole of society. Every member of society performing a certain part of the socially necessary work receives a certificate from society to the effect of the amount of work he has done. And with this certificate, he receives from a public store of consumer goods a corresponding quantity of goods. After a deduction is made of the amount of labor that goes into the public fund, every worker receives from society as much as he has given to it. Right? That's what he's saying. In the first phase of communist society, therefore, cannot yet provide justice and equality. Differences and unjust differences in wealth will persist, but the exploitation of man by man will become impossible, because it will be impossible to seize the means of production, the factories, machines, and land, and make them private property. Marx shows that in the development of communist society, which is compelled to abolish only the first injustice in the means of production, that's taking control of the economy by individuals, which is unable to once again eliminate other injustice, which consists in the distribution of consumer goods, the amount of labor performed. So that's what Lenin says. He says there will be injustice, and unfair injustice. Inequality will exist in socialist countries, right? That's what it says. That's what it says. The reason that radical leftists think China is not socialist, they think it for a couple reasons. The primary reason is because in America, we have all been told what socialism is. And we've all been told that socialism means everyone gets paid the same. I was told this. I learned this in school. Communism is everyone gets paid the same, or everyone shares everything. Neither of those things are true. And because of that, China clearly has billionaires. It clearly has sections of the country where people are still struggling to get ahead, that have just been lifted out of poverty. There's clearly lots of inequality in China. And liberals have reinforced this myth because they're always going on about income inequality. Income inequality. Income inequality has nothing to do with socialism. Income inequality has nothing to do with socialism. Show me where in Marx it says, and we shall make sure that the incomes of all are equal. It never says that. Nowhere. Income inequality has nothing to do with socialism. Everyone getting paid the same wage has nothing to do with socialism. None of that has anything to do with socialism. Okay? Socialism is not about redistribution of income. That happens under every system. There is redistribution of income. It's called taxation. Socialism is about public control of the means of production. It's about the economy being forced to work in the interests of society overall and the chaos of the market being abolished. That's what socialism is about. Socialism is about public control of the means of production, rational planning of the economy to eliminate the chaos of the market to ensure economic growth. And I just read to you quote after quote from Lenin, from Marx, from Engels, making very clear that is what socialism is. Socialism is about who controls the means of production, and that under socialism, there will be inequality. The road to abolishing inequality is abundance. Once there's enough to go around, once there's so much wealth created, the need for social hierarchies, the need for a government, the need for really very much private regulation of anything will fade away when there's vast abundance. Communism, the final stage of communism, is based on vast material abundance. And Marx makes that very clear in the Critique of the Goethe Program. He explains that the basis for the withering away of the state, and each according to his ability, each according to his needs, the basis of that is vast abundance. That's the basis of it. So the people who think China is not socialist, they just don't understand what socialism is. They think socialism is total state ownership. They think socialism is no income inequality. They think socialism is a lot of things. Socialism is public ownership of the means of production. That's what it is. And we learned during the Cold War that you cannot build an egalitarian society in poverty. You can't. You cannot build an egalitarian society in poverty. You can't do it. You cannot build an egalitarian society in poverty. That when there's not enough to go around, some are going to have and some are going to have not. The basis of eliminating inequality is abundance. And capitalism is a system where the more abundance that's created, the more poverty there is. Capitalism is the system of poverty amid plenty, where people are homeless because there are too many houses, where people are hungry because there's too much food. It has this problem of wealth creating poverty, poverty amid plenty. And that is why capitalism must be abolished, so that we have rational economic planning, so growth continues unrestrained. And so we'll finish out this stream tonight. I'm just going to read to you some of the first chapter of this book, which is all about this very, very point. This is the first chapter of my new book, Where is America Going? Here we go. Let's for a minute imagine self-driving cars. We've been told this great technological achievement is not very far in the future. Soon, driving may be a thing of the past, and artificial intelligence, computer sensors, and other innovations may be applied in a way that makes automobile transportation completely automated. In a rational society, this would be cause for celebration. A huge amount of human labor that goes into driving could be expended elsewhere. We could move to a higher level of material abundance, with one form of human labor no longer necessary. However, we do not live in a rational society. We live in a society governed by money and profits. In our highly irrational, market-centered economy, self-driving cars would be a complete nightmare. It is a nightmare that is already hanging over us. As Andrew Yang, a New York businessman and candidate in the 2020 Democratic primaries, told the New York Times, quote, "All you need is self-driving cars to destabilize society. We're going to have 1 million truck drivers out of work who are 94% male, with an average level of high school or 1 year of college. We have 5 to 10 years before truckers lose their jobs and all hell breaks loose." In the high-tech 21st century for-profit American economy, human beings live by selling their labor power to a boss. If someone is unable to sell their labor power, they are rendered unemployed, and it becomes very difficult for them to feed, house, and clothe themselves. Even in the good old days of the 1950s, when the U.S. economy was booming, you still had lots of hungry stomachs in Appalachia, the rural South, and impoverished urban centers. Despite its once big, prosperous middle class, America always had an underclass of those who populate the prisons and the lower ranks of the military. Among this permanent underclass, there has always been a significant overrepresentation of African Americans, Chicanos, and people of color in addition to whites. The existence of the permanent layer of impoverished workers is something the U.S. media has aimed to cover up. It is a strong argument against the image the U.S. elites seek to present of a land of unending prosperity. However, these are not normal times in America. The conditions that have always been present for some are now expanding to the bulk of the population. 60% of American workers are living paycheck to paycheck. Food banks are overwhelmed with demand. The percentage of children living in households deemed to be food insecure by the U.S. Department of Agriculture has risen. The suicide rate and the rate of death from alcohol poisoning and drug overdoses is also rising. The infrastructure of the United States, from power plants to water treatment facilities to roads and bridges, is falling apart. The life expectancy of Americans has decreased to the lowest point in 25 years. Though the economic crisis is the basis, there is a wider cultural and spiritual crisis that has unfolded. There is a political crisis as the elite battle each other and seek to resolve the crisis with heavy-handed force. The root of this crisis can be found in economics, and this book will put forward primarily economic solutions. The economic foundations of our society must be reinvented so that all the human creativity, labor, energy, and natural resources found in the vast territory of the country can be unleashed to once again create huge amounts of growth. That's the first section of my book. That is the first section of my book. It goes on from there. But yeah, that's my new book. You can order it on Amazon. Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution by Caleb Maupin. So there you go. All right, folks. If there aren't any more super chat questions, I guess we'll wrap it up here. That was a great chat with Liam. It was really a lot of fun. Oh, here's one last thing before I go. I have this other YouTube channel that I created called Caleb Maupin Videos. Go and subscribe to it. Let me pull it up here. I'll drop the link in the chat. But go and subscribe to Caleb Maupin Videos, because a lot of people say that they're frustrated because they can't find things, that if I say something good, they can't find it again. Well, I'm trying to cut as much of the contents from these streams onto this other channel. I can't put them on this channel because it'll ruin my notifications and people won't see the streams. But if you go subscribe to this channel, because this is where I cut clips that I post. I post them on this channel. Right now, this channel, it's been around since like August. I've got about almost 700 followers on this channel, subscribers. I would like to get this new channel I created. I'd like to get it up to the point that I could stream on there if I want to. So that would mean 1,000 subscribers on that channel. So go and subscribe to this other channel, Caleb Maupin Videos. Go and subscribe to the other channel. That way you can see the stuff that I cut. But it's always fun to engage with all of you. It's always fun. And yeah, it's been a good night. I will probably not be on tomorrow night, but I will be back Thursday. I'll be back on Thursday. And then next week I'll be in Washington, D.C. Because I'll be getting ready for the summit. So see you all at the Summit Against Hypocrisy. I'll put on the closing music and we'll be out of here. In the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And to answer that last super chat question, yes, I am on Rumble. I have a Rumble channel already, but I will at some point probably stream on there. Not ready yet, but I do have a Rumble channel. Good night, everybody.